Joining us now, as he does on Tuesdays from the province of Post. Yeah, Patrick Johnston enjoying a snow day at home with his girls. How you doing?
Oh, we're good. Yeah, no, I was. Yeah, I heard it was going to be a mess when I left the rink last night. And I went outside. I'm like, that's a lot of snow, but got home okay and woke up this morning and we're still alive. We're still at it. Unlike your Vancouver Canucks.
Which was the bigger mess, inside the rink or outside? Yes.
I mean, I was so struck when we walked into the room, and it was one of those games where, you know, everybody was getting the heck out of there.
Right.
And I kind of get it. Like, I mean, they have only themselves to blame, and there's not a whole lot to say. But just the sort of the dejected look on Bo Horvat's face, and I think maybe he sort of picked himself up before the cameras went on. But just, you know, standing over by the whiteboard screen that they have at one end of the room there, and just kind of leaning on the shelf, and just his shoulders. I don't think we've ever seen his shoulders so low. And just, you know, I mean, the end, as he said, I don't even know what else to say at this, you know, that there's no answers left. They keep giving up too many goals. They're not playing defense, you know, barely at all. And, you know, sure, missing your star player, I mean, that was something Boudreau talked about, is always going to be difficult, but just, you know, the analogy I've been wanting to use is they're a sandcastle facing the tide. And that it's just that there's just this feeling of inevitability these guys all seem to have, that they give up a goal and they just crumble, and they just have no, especially at home, and it is absolutely baffling. It's
the post-game comments to me were as stark as they've been all season long, because we're deeper into the season, right? You can convince yourself things will get better at the 12-game mark or what have you. Yeah. It's getting deeper in the season. And I think, honestly, the holiday season contributes to it. You do some introspection, I think, at this time of year. And that's the danger, I think, Patrick, is that they're coming to terms with what they actually are right now. And that can spread. That's dangerous.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly so. That, you know, there was that mirage on the road an American Thanksgiving last month in Colorado and in Vegas, and they played really well and they earned 2 hard wins. But, you know, I think perhaps that will just be the high watermark of the season. It won't even, you know, last week when they got to 500, it'll just be simply those performances there, and those will be the sort of the what might have been that probably a number of these guys will carry with them. But, you know, as it stands, 14 times they've given up 5 goals or more, and even in a league where goal scoring is up, that's just there's just no ignoring that. That's too many goals to give up. The defensive environment, I wrote a bit about this last week. I mean, you can, any way you want to slice it, you can take the ClearSight Analytics numbers that Woodley gets. You just go look at natural stat trick and some of the stuff that's just sort of the surface level numbers, and you can just see how many more chances this team is giving up this year over last year, over the year before that. You know, 2 seasons where they were considered to be porous defensively, and it's a whole new level this year. And in the end, this is a group of players that they got to mix it up. Like, you cannot sustain this. You cannot suddenly say, oh, these guys are suddenly going to feel better about themselves. The team isn't good enough. The mentality is a mess. And you just can't carry on. You cannot. I do not understand how management can look at this and say, okay, well, maybe they'll turn the next corner. And there's no corners to turn. This is, you know, as you know, I think on the whole, it's a good group of people. They seem like decent group of guys. They get along with each other, but they're not good enough. And it's not a couple tweaks. It's, you know, they need to fundamentally change how this team is put together, and hanging on, thinking maybe it'll turn around, it's just not going to work.
Former Canucks AGM Chris Gear on Twitter. Hard to expect a lot more from a team who is a coach, captain, and top 6 winger, all living on borrowed time, and where all but one player has been labeled expendable. Yes, they're pros. They have to fight harder than this. But that's a tough work environment, or that's a tough environment to work in. You know, we said at the beginning of the year, it was a little unusual and not exactly on trend to have your leadership duo of the head coach and the captain going into the final years of their contract. Do you think they effectively emasculated the leadership, like the folks who could potentially turn this around by not extending it?
I don't know. I mean, I think, how to put it, I feel bad for Boudreau because, you know, this is the tail end of his career. He's had a great career. As he said last night, he's never had a losing season. So, you know, he can't help but be, that was Jeff, great question from Jeff. How do you stay so optimistic? And he says, well, this is all I know. But, you know, this is not how I think, I'm sure, you know, as he went through the sort of rest of his career, you know, daydreamed at some point. There's no way he thought it would go like this. You know, Bo Horvat's given so much to this team, to this organization over the years. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Horvat's, I mean, I think if I had one criticism for Horvat in last night, you know, the guy's done so much offensively. Last night was a game where I think we needed to see something from him, something from JT Miller, whether that's a throw a big hit, you know, just try to drag your team into the fight. And instead it was like the rest of the team. They just kind of threw up their hands, and the game just kind of wandered away from them. And, you know, the Boudreau was optimistic. He said, you know, if we got a goal in the third period, we're back in it. And instead it was bang, bang. You know, they gave up 2 goals to Jordan Kyrou, and it was all over, and the sell the team chance started. The mood in the end, the overall vibe, I mean, yeah, sure, from the top, the criticism from the top certainly doesn't help the situation. The position of the coach and you know, of Bo Horvat, I mean, I'm not so sure if that's really had any kind of effect in that, beyond the fact that, yeah, sure, there's some broader uncertainty. Clearly, this is a team that's fragile mentally. And so there is a way, I suppose you could say, that they kind of, it's all part of that death of it by 1,000 cuts aspect to it all, but I don't think those two positions, those two situations really have any more weight than the fact that, like I said, they can't defend well enough. They haven't really been bailed out of a single game by their goaltenders. And their penalty killing remains atrocious. You know, it's the actual execution of things is just not good enough. However, and so, okay, so they don't feel good about themselves. That doesn't help, but the root cause remains that they're just not good enough.
You mentioned the chants, the boos rained down towards the end of the game as well, and at the end of the period. Do you think that it has any effect on ownership or management at this point? You know, they'll say that they are victims of the flat cap. They just can't make the deals that they want to work. Does it actually increase any level of urgency, or is urgency capped, to borrow a phrase, because of the market?
I find myself wondering, you know, where do things go from here? You know, they if you look at the ticket, or the tickets handed out figure, you know, the attendance figure that, yes, you know, officially last night, I think the number was there. If it was not a sellout, it was close to it, but that was not a sellout. There were still a couple empty suites. I think, you know, that I heard from someone that actually the sort of, you know, the kitchens are busy and the suites are busy, but they're not overflowing. But in the broader context of things, with the realities of how downtown is shifting in terms of work from home and how many people are even around, you know, in relative terms, maybe they're doing fine, but it's so sort of mediocre, you know. Yeah. It's just it's not a bursting at the seams business. It was once a bursting at the seams business, and winning cures most things, but as we've seen, winning takes time and effort and patience and focus, and that there's not been enough of that, if any at all, in the last, you know, 8 or 9 years. And that, to me, I think, you know, everything's sort of stagnant, and it's sort of the same as it ever was. There's a few little innovations here and there, but nothing's ever consistent. There's no sort of coherence to anything. I do find myself wondering in the end, like, yeah, you're right. I mean, there were some things they clearly tried to do in the summer that they couldn't get done because of the cap situation, but then they went and doubled down on JT Miller, and, you know, he's, as I've said, he's a great offensive player, hell of a power play player, but there's just so many in moments where his mark is just incomplete, and so the sort of doubling down on that particular player was such a, set the course for everything else. And so they've kind of picked their course, and it is really kind of hard to conceive that this is the course they picked and how they could think that it was going to go, really how they thought it was going to go any differently, given everything once they got in the situation and recognized, okay, this is a pickle to, we're not going to necessarily be able to trade ourselves out of it like that. But if we were, as Rutherford said, if we're smart and we're patient, we do things, we can probably get out of this. Well, they're kind of, I'm starting to wonder if that ship sailed. They've been here for a year, and they've made some decent pickups. Ethan Bear was a good trade. They've made some decent sort of edge of the roster decisions. But the problems still all remain. And again, like I said, the Miller decision, it just isn't looking that great right now.
Nils Höglander is down to Abbotsford, and that's announced at midnight last night after the game. What do you make of the move, and anything to the timing of it?
Well, the timing was the roster freeze, right? So the roster freeze went in place, if I'm not mistaken, at 11:59 local. So they literally announced it at the last moment. Presumably waiting to make sure that everybody was healthy post game. When they actually filed it officially with the league is not the same as when they tweeted. But I don't know, a curious decision. I mean, obviously they want to see what Lane Peterson is about, which I suppose makes sense. They have a sense of, they know what Hoglander is. He's a good forechecker. He's a hardworking guy. He hasn't been able to finish at sort of the rate he needs to truly be a top line winger, but he's clearly an NHL player. So from that standpoint, I don't quite understand what sending him to the AHL achieves, other than, like I said, they want to have a further look at Lane Peterson. I mean, they've gotten some good play out of Sheldon Dries, but in the end, this is a team that's circling the drain, and I'm not sure what finding out what your sort of mid to late 20s depth forwards are really about actually gains. And that's, Dries and Nils Amon, what he's about, but does he have to play every game? I don't know. It's a curious one. I mean, there's a player that, like I said, he played pretty well last week. I don't know if he was necessarily struggling for confidence. I mean, obviously he only has 3 goals, and so you'd like to think that he can finish a little bit more, but
it feels like a little bit of a lazy default position for this organization, that every time they lose, Hoglander comes out or is sent down to the minors.
Yeah, and so Abbotsford's got him and Podkolzin and Rathbone, and I mean, J-Pat and I were talking about this. It's like, okay, those are kind of supposed to be 3 of your guys, 3 of your guys for the future, and now they're playing for your AHL team, and I don't know what it all means. In the end, it is sort of. I think like you said, that's actually kind of a good way to put it. It's sort of a default idea. There's no, Podkolzin needed to find his groove and needed to find some confidence. I think that much is clear. And from that standpoint, okay, is this now a position where you're trying to, at least with Podkolzin and Hoglander, put them in a spot where they're going to have some success and feel good about what they're doing, and just kind of keep them away from the mess that is the NHL now? Is this now one of the, is this kind of the first move in terms of just sort of saying, all right, we got to steer the ship in a new direction, and we're gonna things are gonna be difficult in the NHL here for a while. I mean, that was the other thought I had, and this is essentially the first towel to be thrown in, and we're gonna see what happens from here. And it's sort of trying to keep some of the players that you have here from getting too sour on things. That's kind of my best guess, I guess.
Gosh. And, the thing I don't understand is Hoglander, Dries, and Garland looked really good in that game last week. And then, even Ferraro said, I'm not sure it's going to last long term. 3 small guys. But at least ride it out for another game, for God's sake.
The last 5 games, guys.
You haven't had lines look that good that often this year. Yeah. Go ahead and give them another shot.
In the last 5 games... And he's only played 5 of the 6 since December the 4th. But since December the 4th, Only Horvat, Kuzmenko, and Pettersson have more points than Nils Höglander at all situations. No one has more even strength points than Nils Höglander since December the 4th. And we're not talking about a guy coming out of the lineup, gentlemen. We're talking about a guy sent to the American League.
Yeah.
And in the last 3 weeks, he's amongst the most productive players at even strength. Like, that doesn't jive.
Yeah. And that's why I said that is kind of why I found myself thinking about, is this really just something else? It's just sort of
feels personal. It feels personal. It does.
It could, yeah. I don't know.
And that's an 11 minutes of ice time per game, by the way,
Yeah.
against guys that are playing 20.
Yeah, barely playing, and there's not a lot of guys that have had a good December, and he's had a pretty good December. I saw him briefly in the press box last night, and he had his usual sort of reasonably happy looking demeanor. He's a guy that generally, I think, especially lately, I think has been carrying himself pretty positively. But yeah, it's in the end, I think, like I said, I just go back to what I was kind of pondering, was, in the end, is this just, is this just a situation where it's like, what, let's put him somewhere and give him a break from whatever it is that's going on around him, and it's hard to imagine he won't be back. I mean, like you said, he's been a reasonably productive player and had some struggles early on, but lately it's been useful. And again, we talk about the thing that kind of blows my mind is, as Boudreau admitted, said, listen, we know how important Pete Pettersson is. We haven't had him for a couple of games. He's been unwell. And here they are. I mean, last night, Boudreau started the game with mixed up every one of his lines and every one of his defense pairs, trying to see if he could shake something loose out of Saturday night's miserable effort. And then last night, they had a decent first period. I thought they were kind of in it. They could have used the goal. I did note down to myself, will they rue not scoring on those early power plays? And obviously they did, because they gave up the first goal again, 8th time in 9 games they gave up the first goal. And just, even though they got that McKayev goal, they just never found their feet, and just the game slipped away from them. And I guess the thing is, in the end, it is a team that's, the playoffs are slipping away, but in the midst of the fight, I don't understand taking out one of your highest energy guys, and Hoglander is consistently a high energy player. That part was strange to me, and then, like I said, I'm trying to grasp at straws a little, or trying to figure out a little, what the heck they're thinking in sending him down. It's not, they're off today, so we're not going to get that answer, but nothing is that great right now. I mean, the sort of winning streak here was a bit of the good play has been a bit of a mirage. They haven't won a regulation game since Vegas. It's been 10 games. It's been either OT, shootout wins, or just outright losses. And the outright losses have been atrocious.
Buddy, we're out of time. Thank you for yours. And we will not be speaking next week, shortly after the holidays. So we'll catch up with you in 2023. Thanks for everything in 2022, Patrick.
Happy New Year, guys.
Yeah. Merry Christmas.
Take care.